Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling and election analysis in the United States. And today we're going to be looking at the 2024 presidential election based on demographics. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And so Donald Trump has been improving with African and Hispanic Americans the most in the polling data heading into the 2024 presidential election. If we were to look at the three most accurate national pollsters, those being Rasmussen Reports, Atlas Intel, as well as big poll data from the last few cycles, we can see that Donald Trump has a respectable lead with white Americans. We see with African Americans, he's getting about 30%. Hispanics, he's down 4 points, and with other, he's only down 3, and this would be kind of a humongous landslide in the Electoral College if this were to actually occur. Looking at the Atlas Intel poll with white Americans, he's leading by a whopping pretty much 16 points with them. He's doing very well with that group. Hispanics, he's down by about 13 points. With African Americans, he's only down like 49 points, 50 points, which is crazy. Asians, he's basically down by 2. And with other, he's actually up about 4 points. And when we look at big data poll, he's leading whites by about 13, down with African Americans by about 50 points here as well, 51 points. And Hispanic voters, he's down about 20-ish points, probably even less than that. He's probably down like 17 here. And Asian/other, he's only down about 7. And so if we were to go to this demographic swingometer that basically would kind of give us the results we were looking for, what's kind of interesting is they decided to group together white non-graduates and white college. But if Donald Trump on average, let's say he's leading by 10 here, he's leading by 16 here, and he's leading by about 13 here. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, he's pretty much winning the election with give or take about a 13 percentage point margin with white voters. Let's say that's the case, right? More than likely, if that's going to be the case, the demographic numbers from these margins actually stay about the same because Donald Trump did win the white vote by about 13 points last time. And so really, there is basically no change. You can probably push these a little bit to the right, like just a tiny bit. You could probably push these a little bit to the right, but that's about it. And looking at Georgia, it already flips in this scenario, which is very interesting. And Arizona's about to flip. Now, looking at the African American vote, we see here about a 35-point lead, roughly give or take. Harris on average in these polls is getting about 70% of the black vote, which is 20 points worse than the last cycle, which again is not a great performance. And overall, on average, basically looking at all these polls, Donald Trump is getting about 25% of the vote. He's getting around 25-ish. And so when you look at that, he is really just completely running it up in the Electoral College. You see here, he's basically ahead in the popular vote already, and he's winning all these states by quite easy margins, including Georgia being a very easy victory, by the way, guys. I mean, Georgia here is a huge win. And looking at Hispanics, give or take, if we were to look at these polls, Kamala Harris at about roughly, give or take, you could say is getting around, it's a pretty iffy margin, give or take, but we could say on average roughly about 48% of the Hispanic vote. So we can kind of set that up already. So she's getting about 48% here. And then with Donald Trump, he's getting roughly, give or take, based on looking at all the crosstabs from these, averages, give or take. And again, these are very accurate pollsters, by the way, guys. These are pollsters that have gotten the election correct a lot the past couple cycles. He's at about roughly 41% of the Hispanic vote. So we boost that up to about 41%. Now that kind of puts him roughly, give or take, ahead by 2 points. ish, and he's about at 78 million votes to Kamala Harris's 75 million. And then with Asian slash other, we can kind of look through these demographics. Give or take with this group, he's probably going to be trailing with them by roughly 4 points. So let's say in this scenario, he's roughly getting about, give or take, he's probably getting about 44% this time, which is a big difference. So he's getting about 44% with that group. And Harris, give or take, looking at this other demographic right now, is getting about roughly, give or take, about 47%, which is actually right around where I have her. Now, looking at the turnout of the election, this is also something important too, and you can already see a 3-point lead is already here for Donald Trump, which is very similar to the aggregate that I have right now, by the way. Now, looking at the turnout for the election, if we were to go look at, for example, Alice Intel, because they tend to be the best when it comes to electorates and sampling. So we're going to go ahead and use this as our baseline in terms of what the electorate looked like. And so when we look here, about 69% of the electorate was white. And so if we add up these two numbers for the white vote, it's about 73. So give or take, we do actually kind of have to lower this number. So probably once we do lower this down a bit to kind of compensate for that, kind of shift, right now it says that African Americans, give or take, are at about 12% of the electorate, which is about where we have them. So right about there. Looking at, Hispanic, you have about a 2% Asian vote, 12% Hispanic. So Hispanics are actually outvoting black voters, which is interesting. I kind of find that very, very fascinating that they're actually outvoting African Americans in this election cycle. So again, something really interesting to ponder upon in the future. And Asians are all the way down at like 2.8%. They're all the way down. So when it's all said and done, and maybe, looking at that, that vote for, we could see about 70 something percent here. So give or take, Donald Trump right now, actually, what's really fascinating about this, guys? Right now, Donald Trump is up by 3.1% in this matchup. And you guys want to know something pretty coincidental about this? If we were to go and look at my polling average for the election, the adjusted one for basically, looking at all of the pollsters, the accurate ones plus the liberal ones, if we go to that aggregate, he's up by 3.4%. But funny enough, when we look at the most accurate pollsters and their current polling, I have to update Rasmussen's polling. But when we look at them, Donald Trump's exact lead is Trump plus 3.1, which is exactly what this demographic margin has. And he's basically hitting 50%. Harris is at around 47, give or take, and third parties are getting about 3. So this would kind of make perfect sense. And looking at this map, Donald Trump is winning about 312 electoral college votes to Harris's 226. And so it is a pretty decent win in the electoral college. And if we were to map this out, we can kind of go ahead and look at what this electoral college victory would exactly look like on a map. This is not an official projection, but is merely kind of what this demographic modeling does show for the election. So he'd probably be winning all of these states by around a safe margin, give or take. Iowa and Ohio would be likely margins, as well as Texas and Florida. We could even see in the modeling here that Donald Trump in Texas and Florida would be up by 14 and 12 points. So they'd actually be voting to the right of Ohio and Iowa. So again, very interesting stuff here. And looking at some other, states, that's actually about it for the safe and likely states for the Democrats. Now, as for the Republicans, as for the Democrats, you have California, Hawaii in the safe column. Well, actually, let's even check if it's in the safe column. Yeah, barely in the safe column. and we see certain states are way closer. Maryland is actually only a 19-point victory for Kamala Harris, which is kind of interesting because a lot of polling has actually shown Biden and Harris performing relatively similar to that margin, believe it or not. So that's actually pretty fascinating that that's kind of lining up that way. And that's actually it, give or take. I mean, Maine's first is safe. Colorado, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Rhode Island, New York are in the likely Democrat column as well. Looking at Illinois, that's in the likely column. Oregon and Washington, we can see that they're a little bit under the 15-point threshold, but they're about there. Colorado's a 9-point victory for Harris. Illinois is about an 8-point victory. The Northeast does kind of narrow up a bit. New York's about a 14-point win for Kamala Harris. And so now looking at the electoral map, we see like North Carolina and Georgia. I mean, these are like massive wins. Like you're talking about a 14-point win in Georgia and 11-point victory in North Carolina. These states have very sizable African American populations, hence the humongous shift towards them. So this is really interesting to see this kind of play out here because Donald Trump is up very heavily in these two states, and it is mostly because of that African American vote shift nationwide. Looking at Arizona and Nevada, he's actually winning these by exactly 5 points and 5.1% respectively. So another two likely states added to the Trump column here. So he's basically a lock in the Sun Belt, and he's about 268 to win. New Mexico's about a 2.5-point victory for Harris, which is about where I have it. Looking at Montana, that's a 3.4, Minnesota, that's a 3.4 percentage point victory. The state has been trending to the left, so it kind of would make sense to see this kind of stay as a lean margin. I currently have it as tilt because I have Trump kind of doing better with non-college, but if I do apply this demographic model to the election, I'm curious to see what would actually happen. I may end up applying this demographic model to the electoral college prediction model that I have to kind of see how it kind of influences it and how I can get it to be more accurate. Virginia is an interesting one because this one's actually only a point for Harris, and we've even seen early voting data out of here basically look really good for Kamala Harris out of the state, for Donald Trump, because a lot of the red districts have higher turnout right now than do the blue districts right now. Like basically all of the districts so far in the early voting from Virginia, more Republican districts have more votes compared to their 2020 total than blue districts do, which signifies that Republicans have higher turnout in their core base areas, which is a good sign heading into the election. If that's happening in Virginia, that's probably going to be happening almost in all the swing states. Now, looking at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, we see that Donald Trump is basically up here by a lean margin in all these states. Now, again, what's kind of fascinating about this is, more than likely Donald Trump will be underestimated with white voters. So if we were to actually shift these, a little bit, we'll actually play around with that in a second because Maine and New Hampshire are actually both likely margins of victory for Kamala Harris based out of the model that I have here. And Nebraska is about a lean margin. The Nebraska 2nd district is a lean margin. So this would kind of be the final map based on what we did. But let's say, Donald Trump does end up, doing a little bit better with the white vote than we anticipate. Let's say he's doing slightly better with college educated, as a lot of the crosstabs actually have him doing a lot better with. Let's say he improves slightly with this demographic. He's actually already basically closing in on a tilt margin in some of these states. He's winning all the swing states by likely margins. He's got Virginia in his columns, even winning Georgia by 15, winning Texas by 15. He's winning Ohio by 15. So some interesting stuff there. And my Arizona margin's kind of matching up there. North Carolina, that's sort of a 13-point win. All the Rust Belt states would be safe. New Hampshire and Maine would kind of be the lean margins that I'm suspecting them to be. So does New Mexico. And Minnesota is basically a tilt margin. And Nebraska 2nd is going lean Republican. That would be a little bit more of a hefty electoral college win. But quite funny enough, guys, what's very interesting is that this would be about a 5-point win in the Electoral College for Trump. And what's pretty interesting about this is that Kamala Harris's adjusted favorability is about 47% when you account for undecideds. And a lot of times people that are somewhat unpopular, people that tend to be more establishmentarian, and most incumbents a lot of the times usually tend to underperform their favorability rating and usually tend to outperform their job approval rating. That's kind of always how this goes. And Donald Trump's recall approval a lot of the times ends up being around over 50%, which is about where he is here right now. So Virginia being in question for Donald Trump is a big possibility, as well as states like Minnesota, New Mexico, New Hampshire, and Maine at large. It's very possible that I may be underestimating him with college and non-college whites, because even when we reweigh a lot of the polling in Virginia and New Hampshire, not only is he leading in the Virginia aggregate, he's actually almost basically tied in the New Hampshire aggregate when we reweigh all the polling data. In mine, he's actually even up in the state. And so this is it for the demographic modeling of the 2024 presidential election based on very accurate pollsters and what they kind of show. It shows Donald Trump winning the Electoral College with a very modest victory. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button to subscribe if you guys want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.